Is that right? Yeah.
I can think about one new book that you think I should put this one over here. Just when
You already talked to
I've already taught 2
Right.
classes today, so it's super punchy. So, you could talk.
Understandable.
You could talk.
Do you want me to wait for a few more?
Like 1 minute, I think.
Okay.
Just like a minute, so we got.
No problem.
Do you know how many people signed up virtually?
No, but I have.
Well,
The number of RCPs for
the
in
new one
person.
they just published, not new book, but just after all.
No, I don't
Yes,
know.
I have that one.
But we have 2
actually.
people online.
I have that one on my.
I'm
Okay.
looking forward to read it. Yeah, it's like, yeah, but there's something I think that's been really good, you know.
Actually, we're reading critical stuff.
I don't
So
want
I
those.
can't recommend.
Okay,
it to
great.
you.
Well,
I've tapped with that recently, but I did really like.
yeah, I mean, I rely on these recommendations. I
I
mean, there's
know.
plenty I'd love to try, but I always go with you first, you never let me down.
Pull up my.
I'm still not good with the Stockholm Spend one, because I really didn't trust you, and I thought that book was so amazing.
Yeah.
It was one of the best books I read last year. So I'm not reading that Arctic.
But yeah, the last like 22.
We're dead.
Ooh.
All right. Thank you all so much for coming. I need to make sure I speak loud enough for the people online. So hold on. Thank you all so much for attending. Left Bank Books presents Lecia Michelle for her new book, The White Allies Handbook, 4 weeks to join the racial justice fight for Black women. For all of you here in person, thank you for being here and for wearing your mask for the duration of the event. For those of you joining us at home, we really appreciate your support. And feel free to share the link with your friends. You will be able to ask questions during the audience Q&A at the end of the event for you all and you all. Just type your questions as a comment if you're online, and we'll facilitate the rest of you. It has been really incredible to host over 2 years worth of virtual events. We have brought in over 300 authors virtually for everyone to enjoy over the course of the pandemic, thanks to Shane Mullen, our event coordinator. If you have not caught any of our virtual events, most of them are free and still available on our Facebook and YouTube. We have a wide variety of authors for your enjoyment. We are thrilled, though, to bring back in-person programming as well. We have more in-person events planned for September and October and beyond. We have many fantastic authors coming to St. Louis, like Pulitzer Prize winning author Andrew Sean Greer, New York Times bestselling author Sarah Kinzier, who's coming next Tuesday, Pulitzer Prize winner Buzz Bissinger, and best-selling author of What If Randall Monroe, all of those in September.
Corey Bush.
Oh, and newly announced, we're doing an event with Corey Bush live in October. Grab your tickets early. All right, so the White Allies Handbook. You've read White Fragility and How to Be an Anti-Racist, but what comes next? The answer lies in this clear, actionable guide providing a vital 4-week program for becoming an ally who makes a real difference in the racial justice fight. Get the tools you need to get off the sidelines and onto the front lines of allyship, combat racism while supporting Black women, and avoid common pitfalls white people fall into when they think about and discuss racism. As quoted by Kirkus Reviews, this timely, no-nonsense handbook offers an important blueprint for white allies to carry out the often uncomfortable but necessary work of promoting racial equality among all marginalized people. Welcome straight talk for a new age in race relations. Black women have always been the driving force behind real change in this country, especially when it comes to racial justice work. But they shouldn't have to do it alone. If you're ready to stop standing on the sidelines and become anti-racist instead of passively not racist, then this book is what you need. You'll discover how to have difficult conversations about white supremacy, racism, and white privilege, how to listen to criticism without defensiveness, why it's harmful to ignore race or claim to be colorblind, how to expand your racial justice circle by joining groups led by Black women and cultivating a group of like-minded allies. Racism can only be defeated if white people educate themselves and actively engage in anti-racism work, especially in their inner circles. With this book, you'll learn how to change from someone who defends and protects racism to someone who fights against it. And you'll become an example to others that true allies are made, not born. Lecia Michelle is a writer, librarian, educator, activist, and founder of Real Talk, Women of Color and Allies for Racial Justice and Anti-Oppression. She has been a librarian for over 15 years, working in both universities and public libraries, and has a BA in journalism from Eastern Illinois University and a Master's of Library and Information Sciences degree from San Jose State University. She lives in Southern Illinois and can be found on Twitter at Lecia Michelle 11. Would you all please help me in warmly welcoming Lecia Michelle for Lefty?
That's a lovely introduction. I'm so happy to be here. I just moved back to the area. I was in New Orleans and I was like, no, that's not going to work. So I came back to Southern Illinois. So what I hope to accomplish in this talk is, if you're already an ally, I want to give you some tips on how to be more effective. If you're thinking about being an ally and kind of haven't started yet, I want to get you going. So that's the point of what we're going to talk about today. How are you going to be successful? How are you going to be effective? How are you going to be action-based? All of that. So let's start. She already did that part, so I'm going to skip that. Okay, so before I get into the different steps that I think are important for you, keep in mind a couple of things. Allyship is always timely. And I say this because how many of us heard when we had Obama as president that racism was all but over? I don't think one Black person said that, but I heard a lot of white people. Allyship means action. I'll get into this a little bit more later, but consider that it doesn't really matter how many books you read. You can read every book on racial justice. If you never open your mouth, you're part of the problem, right? Allyship and anti-racism is never ending. If you decide, and I hope you do, decide to be an ally to the day you die is what I expect you to do. It's going to be every day until you die. So this is step one. We have 7 steps I'm going to help you with. So step one, you need to learn about anti-racism work. And this is a really huge part. I did not know until I moved back to St. Louis just how activist-based this city is. It is amazing. So if you have not joined local organizations here, please do. Find some that are led by Black people, specifically Black women. Also take advantage of the fact that most of us have online presences. So if we're not local to you, find somebody online that you can listen to, and find several. I say that because while I would love for you to follow me on Twitter and listen to all my ranting on Twitter, that's great, but there are other people who will have other opinions, other backgrounds, cultures, experiences. You want to have a variety. You know, we're not a monolith, so I can't speak for every Black woman, and they can't all speak for me. So I said join a racial justice group. So you're going to benefit from spaces led by Black women. I know that there are large organizations that are white-led, and they specifically do that because they don't want to have us do all the labor, which I get. But the challenge with that is, how are they going to tell my story in the most accurate way, you know? So while I want you to join organizations like Surge, because I think that they're good, make sure that you're supplementing with organizations led by Black women, because you're going to need all of that experience to be effective. Stacey Abrams, woohoo! Yes, she's amazing. So I want you to support Black women in leadership positions. And I know when we say that, we typically think, oh, politics is what it is. Not all the time. So in St. Louis, there are lots of Black women who have small businesses. How many of you are supporting those businesses? Think about the services that you use all the time and seek out someone local who is doing that and support them. The next phase of that is telling all your friends that you're supporting them. That's how they're going to be successful. The pandemic really did a number on minority businesses, specifically Black-owned businesses in the city. A lot of them went under. So people are now trying to regroup and get those businesses going again. So this is where your money, put your money where your mouth is. Support those businesses, support those services. If you can't find somebody local that does something that you really, really want to support, go online and find somebody, who's doing it. In your racial justice groups, what's really nice is that most people in there will have great suggestions for you on who you can support and why. There are Black women running, all kinds of businesses now. So we really do need people to step up and really support those businesses and give them free advertising. Post it somewhere on your social media that you use them. Support Black female-led business, I mentioned that. So as far as political candidates, we already know that you can canvass if you're local, which is amazing. But if you're not local, what can you do? You can do the postcards, you can still text bank, you can still phone bank. I know people who do that every election, no matter where they live, they'll do it, everywhere. Yes, it's time consuming, but again, we're coming up on some really, really important elections. So we really have to pay attention to what's going on and realize that if we don't win some of these elections, what we think is bad now is just going to get worse. So, we have to step up and really help these candidates. The last one is really near and dear to my heart because I had such a hard time working corporate America. And I experienced some really horrendous racism when I was working there and misogyny. And basically, I just had to suck it up until I could leave. It was terrible. So the reason that I say work from inside your organization is no matter what your role is there, if you see something, as a white person, it's going to be safer for you to speak up than for me to speak up. And that's really unfortunate. I mean, that's just what it is. I worked in a communications department of a mutual funds company, and our entire department was liberal. The person harassing me was liberal. He was a white guy. Everyone knew. No one ever spoke up. And so I ended up just leaving, but I was there for 7 years dealing with that. So, that's a huge example, but also consider all those little kind of, Shane and I were talking about microaggressions that we deal with in the workplace that you're kind of like, was that really racism? I don't know. If I tell you that it was, and it's really hard for us to speak up and even tell you that we're having those experiences. So it's up to you to pay attention in those spaces. So at work, if you're out and about somewhere and you notice that something's just not quite right with the conversation going on with a Black person and a white person, just pay attention. And you can step in. We want you to step in those conversations, because your white skin, your privilege is going to get you way further than if I raise my voice and say something. I might go to jail or worse. So that's just part of the work. So step 3, take advantage of your white accountability partners. And this is something that is just near and dear to my heart because I talk a lot about this in my Facebook group. My Facebook group right now has about 1,500 people. The majority of us are women of color, but the white women in there have accountability groups and accountability partners. So no one's left on their own. And the reason that is good is because it's really disappointing when I come across people who are super gung-ho about doing work and they just drop off. They're like, oh, I'm just tired of doing it. I'm just worn out. I'm like, wow, really? Because I'm more worn out. And it's disappointing when they've come really far and they just realize that they just rather be with their friends and their families and, that they've done what they can do and they're kind of over it at this point. Like I said, it's a lifelong commitment. That's what it should be. So one of the reasons that I tell people to have an accountability partner, affinity group, something you want to keep going with the ally work. There'll be times you will be so incredibly unhappy with how things are going. There'll be most of the time. You'll be so upset and so mad about things. You have to have somebody to talk to. That's why you have a partner or a group, because you can role play those situations, figure out what went wrong. If something happened when you were out and you had to confront somebody, you want to be able to kind of discuss that with someone else, not me necessarily, but with another white person. These are all learning experiences, even if it's something that happened and went really badly, still a learning experience, but you're going to need other people to talk to. One of the other reasons that I want you to have an accountability partner or some kind of group to talk to is anytime that you make a mistake, and when you're doing ally work, you're going to make a ton of mistakes, and that's okay. I expect that. But you need to unpack them and figure out where you went wrong, and then you do it better the next time. It's just practice. You're doing things, you're putting yourself out there, being uncomfortable, you're screwing up a lot,
but you're making progress every time. And then another thing that's really important, I'll mention this again later, is all those mistakes that you make are stories for somebody else who you're trying to help and educate. You know, you don't want to ever come across as someone who has never made a mistake in ally work. That shouldn't be the case. Another reason that you need to have an accountability partner or an affinity group is because you have to call people out. So that's a huge part of the work. It's really uncomfortable, but it's part of your job. If you witness one of your affinity partners say something, do something racist, you have to call them in. And what you do is you work through what they said or what they did, why it was wrong. Have somebody else help you if you're not comfortable. At the end of that discussion, they should have a very clear idea of where they misstepped. Let's say if it's something that was said to me and they actually know me, what would happen in that case is that they would actually formulate an apology with an explanation as to clearly what they did wrong, so I know. You know, I'm not saying that the apology is going to be 100%, I feel better now, but it's an educational experience for you, but I'm going to feel a little bit better, at least you thought about it. You know, and we don't get that very often, honestly. Most of the time it's like, oh, I didn't mean it. I didn't intend that. But that doesn't matter because the impact of your words are always going to be way more important than those intentions. The last one is one that I talk about a lot. Please don't partner with your mom or your dad or your cousin or your best friend. Don't do that. I say that because how effective are you going to be calling out your mom? I'm not saying you're not going to have that conversation because you will, but that person should not be your accountability partner. There's going to be too much emotion. You know, your accountability partner should be, you can be someone who is kind of a friend, but you don't want to have those emotional ties because you're going to be so worried about upsetting them and hurting their feelings that the conversations you're having that should be really educational are going to be like, I don't know if I can say this. I don't know if I can say these things. I don't want to hurt their feelings. That should never be part of it. It always should be, here's what you did, here's some resources to help you, let's talk about it, let's work through it, let's do role play, let's figure out how you can do it better the next time. That whole process is near impossible with someone that you love. It's just not going to happen. Those people will probably yell at you or cry. So that's why you don't want to have your partners with them. So step 4, accept criticism without defensive-ness. And again, this is a really difficult thing to do for all of us. You know, you get defensive immediately when someone criticizes you. I would say one of the best ways to kind of get past that, keep your eye on the prize. Your goal is to be a better ally. So you can be defensive, just don't say you're being defensive. Like just don't say anything. Just listen to what that person is saying. You can ask questions like, okay, what did you mean when you said that I was demonstrating a microaggression? You know, you can ask questions like that, clarify what they're saying, but you don't want to say, well, I said I was sorry and I didn't mean it. You know, none of that matters. That's just a way for you to stop having the conversation that we're having in that moment because you're getting uncomfortable. So the other thing that I tell people is you need to listen more and talk less. If you're called out and you're doing this the whole time, you're just talking over that person and you're getting upset, there's no education going on. You're frustrated, they're frustrated. You know, so you need to have an agreement that when you're called in or called out that you listen. Again, you can ask questions, but you should not be the person talking the most in that situation. You should be talking very little. The tone policing thing, I get tone policed all the time by white people. It's all the time because they'll say to me, because I'm very direct when I call out racism. I don't think I'm rude, but I am very direct. And so I've had people say to me, well, if you were nicer, I would be an ally. Dang it. You know, when I know full well they would never be an ally. That's just a complete lie. One thing that I always say too is if someone says something that's really an ugly racist comment, why on earth do I have to be nice to you about it? You know, I'm probably not going to be very nice about it. I might have some expletives in there or whatever, but this is the thing. You have to ignore my anger and you have to look at the message. You know, your job, again, is to listen and learn. If you're tone policing, you already decided that whatever I'm saying doesn't matter. Do not tone police other white people who come to you and say, I can't believe you said that. That was awful. You're a racist. Like, just
they don't have to be nice about it either. You know, racism, when you're having those discussions, you have to be really blunt a lot of times. And sometimes it is where you're just angry. You know, sometimes it's just a terrible comment. I've had people call me the N-word. Of course, I'm not going to be nice about it. But people who are just like, you call them out in a very direct way. Like if you say, well, you know, what you said was really racist. And they say, well, what are you mean? Why are you mean? Why are you being mean to me? Not being mean. You know, you have to be just really blunt and direct, because I realize as long as I've done this work that if I'm not direct, people will figure out how to kind of go behind what I'm saying and make a lot of excuses about it, and then basically say, well, I don't really think it was that bad. It was, you know, I apologize. It wasn't that bad, you know, but they're not going to learn anything from it either. And that's a problem. Do not apologize right away. I know that sounds kind of weird, but if you've said something racist and you really don't understand the impact of what you did, why would you apologize in that moment? What you can say is, I hear you. I hear that I hurt you. I understand that I misstepped. Let me talk to my accountability partner and figure out how I can work through this. I'm going to come back and talk to you about it, and I will apologize and explain. You know, the apology is just a cop out. It's like you just want to shut the conversation down. So don't worry about apologizing in that moment. I love this picture. Step 5. So this is when you're going to start talking to people and having those really uncomfortable conversations. So this is my favorite part. Okay. So who are you going to talk to? Not your Uncle Bob, who's been a racist his entire life. He's probably a member of the KKK. Like, he's not going to change, right? So I always tell people, find the people who you already know are going to be kind of receptive, because you want to get some wins in there, or at least some half wins or something, you know, otherwise you're going to be just so upset from like day one. I'm not saying that you're not going to talk to Uncle Bob, because you will, but Uncle Bob probably isn't going to change. So you're going to be an instigator instead of an educator. Anytime he says something, you just shut it down. Uncle Bob, you're racist. I don't want to hear it. My kid's not coming around you ever if you're like this. You know, you have to give them consequences too. So it's really, really important that you find somebody in those the first steps that when you have these conversations, find somebody who's fairly open to what you're saying. Maybe they're just problematic in that they stereotype Black people. Just that one's workable. Like you can have documentation and have them, you know, read things, and you may need to push them a little bit to where they're not as bad. Also keep in mind that it's never going to be one conversation. I always find that people were like, well, I talked to them and they didn't change. Well, I don't know what to do. I give up. You can't give up. It's going to be multiple conversations. That's what the work is. You know, if I'm having a conversation with you and you're not understanding what I'm saying, then at that point, I'm going to bring you something to read, give you some homework on something to watch. I'll probably watch it with you. We'll talk about it, and we'll keep having the conversations. One thing that I also tell people who are the person trying to educate the other person is, like I said previously, draw on where you screwed up and tell them, look, I had a problem with this too. Let me tell you how I kind of worked through it. Because if you're coming to this person as if, well, I already know everything, so I'm going to teach you everything that I know. And you're coming off like you have never made a mistake, you are not an ally. That's not how allies behave. You know, people that I know who've done this work for 30 and 40 years can recite all their mistakes to you, and they'll tell you all of them. And they'll say, I tell you this because I want you to understand how far I've come and how far I still need to go. You know, so that's why I say in my book, keep a journal of all your encounters and thoughts and all of that, because you'll be surprised after like a year where you are versus where you started. And that journal is going to be a really great thing to share with someone else who's starting their ally journey. So I think I touched on this a little bit, but just acknowledge that having that conversation is difficult. Again, draw from how you felt when people started to educate you about racism and how you've been racist and how you've been complicit. It's just a hard conversation. It's emotional. Somebody might cry. It might be you who cries when you're educating. You know, it's okay. But just work through that and just acknowledge that it's just, you know, these are hard talks. You know, it's nothing fun about talking about racism. You know, somebody might get angry with you. But if you're having the conversation with somebody that you love, you're doing it because you love them. And you have to tell them that's like, I want you to be a better person. I don't want you to be the way that you are. I love you enough to talk to you about this. I have friends who have basically told relatives, especially if they have kids, you can't be around my kids anymore. Or if you are, I'm going to make sure that you don't say the things that you say, and I'll say in front of my kids, Grandpa's being racist. You know, you have to have a consequence. That's how your kids are going to learn from the people that you think are older and kind of harmless. If they're saying things, your kid's going to pick that up. I mentioned this earlier too, set realistic goals. It's going to be several conversations. You know, don't burn yourself out. It doesn't have to be back-to-back conversations, but have one conversation, give them some stuff to read, go to a museum with them, watch a documentary with them, talk about that, take a break, come back and talk to them some more. You know, you don't want to have it back to back to back because they're going to be exhausted and you're going to be exhausted. And if we're talking about a lifetime commitment, you're not going to make it if you're burning yourself out. So I want you to just kind of pace yourself. You'll never run out of people to talk to. And again, use your own experiences because this is how you're going to make real change. If you're telling people the ways that you have grown or the ways that you've kind of fallen a little bit, you're going to be relating to them on a level that is really, really important. And you want to be on their level. You don't want to be like, well, coming at this as this really amazing ally and you're down here. No, you're really on the same level, because even if you're someone who's progressed a long way, this possible as a white person, you will start falling back into your old ways if you're not constantly working on it. Step 6, white privilege. I've had this talk a lot, doesn't ever go well. It's always an ugly conversation. So the definition, the unearned, mostly unacknowledged social advantage white people have over other racial groups simply because they are white. Yeah, okay. So I lost count how many times I've talked to white people about white privilege, and I would say more than half of them will tell me there's no way I have it. There's no way. I grew up poor. I hear that I grew up poor, I was middle class, my parents didn't help me, I don't have privilege. Just means they don't understand what it means. Then when you explain it to them, it's still kind of like, I don't think so. And I think the reason that they fight it so hard is because they don't want to believe that anything that they got, they didn't actually earn. So it's it's a hard thing to acknowledge, but it's not like the research isn't there. The research is right in front of you that yes, you know, even if you were dirt poor, you could walk out of a building right now and your white skin would allow you to feel safer than me, you know. And I've had these talks multiple times. I expect you all to have those talks. They don't go well, but I also think that the more you have the conversation with people, the more they kind of recognize this isn't a ding on being white. It is just history in this country. It's just history, you know, and the fact that you were born white, you were born with this unearned privilege, it's not something that I'm saying, well, that makes you a bad white person. No, it's just a fact. So that's why I say all the ways you can use your white privilege for good, that is how you pay us back. You know, you're going to use it for good. You're going to speak up. You're going to stand up. One thing that I had a couple of allies I work with do that I think is amazing is anytime they see a black person pull over by a car, they stop and they watch and they film. And I think that that's really amazing. So think about the ways you can use your privilege. One thing I talk about in my book too that I don't think white people think about is going to stores like CVS for me and looking for pantyhose that match my skin tone. Didn't happen. You can get some black ones and just hope for the best. You're not going to get my skin tone. Bandages. They're just now coming up with bandages that are like this color, which is, you know, very strange. So all those things that we don't think about, you know, your white skin is the default for a lot of things, you know. But I want you to be able to speak up. There's exercise I use in my book, and think about the next time you go to Walgreens or CVS or some other drugstore, go to like the bandage aisle and see what you see. Go to the pantyhose aisle and see that there's like literally a bunch of fleshy color and there's black. That's pretty much it. So that's privilege, especially if it's in a neighborhood that's very diverse. Yeah. And then the last one, the fallacy of color blindness. I don't know why I've had this conversation recently as often as I have, because it's a stupid conversation when I have it. It's really stupid. I've had people tell me, I really am colorblind. I don't even see your color. I just see you as a person. I see us all as equal. And they're just all thrilled. And I'm like, well, I don't understand why any of that is good, because if you don't see my color, you don't see my experiences, my history, my culture, my ancestors, and yet it is a battle to have people understand that, color blindness is not what our goal should be. You can see me as an individual and an equal and see my skin color. I did not realize until a couple of years ago that some white people were raised to believe that if you mentioned skin color, it was a bad thing. I didn't know that, y'all. I was like, so strange. But what's interesting is that you're taught that, but studies tell us that you see skin color by the age of 2. So what are you telling these little kids who are like, she has brown skin? Like, what do you tell her then? Like, what do you tell your kids? To me, saying that you're colorblind tells me also that you're really uncomfortable talking about race. And for me, anytime that someone says that to me, I have to explain to them, then you're erasing me. You're erasing me as a person. You're already treating me as someone less because you're looking at my skin color and you're saying, excuse me, and you're saying, it doesn't matter to me. Which means I don't matter to you, And we don't want to be that kind of a society. So when you start your ally work, if you're already doing it, you'll hear that all the time. I'm colorblind. I don't see color. And then people want to quote Dr. King to me. I'm like, okay, whatever. we're so done. He didn't even say that. He didn't even say that. Yeah, it's very strange. Step 7, this is the last one. So these are 2 of my favorite things to talk about too, because they're so common in ally work. So people who want to be perfectionist, and then people who want to be performative. So interesting. So someone who is a perfectionist in ally work, they are terrified of making a mistake. That's what it comes down to. The call out, when someone calls you in for your racism, people are so afraid of having those conversations. And I get it, because it's not a fun conversation. But also, if you're practicing perfectionism and allyship, you're never going to grow. Never. Because if you're comfortable, that means you're not having conversations around race with other people. You're not addressing your own racism. You're reading probably, which is great, but you have to do more than that. And I tell people, what things have you done in your life that you're really good at, that you were good at immediately? It doesn't happen a lot. You have to practice, make mistakes, get better, learn from them, and then you start mastering things. So I try to put it like that. It's like ally work is exactly the same. Expect to make mistakes. You make mistakes all the time as an ally, because what you should be doing is pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, being uncomfortable, seeking discomfort, being in situations where you really have to go, oh, this doesn't feel good, I'm going to push through it. That's how you learn. And then you practice, like I said, role playing is a huge thing. So in your affinity group, the person that you're partnering with, think of situations where something didn't go well. Role play that situation, figure out where you kind of messed it up, figure out how to fix it, and the next time you do it, it's going to be better. A silent lurker. So, this person. Okay, so in my group, like several years ago, so we're 1,500 now. We were 7,000 at our height. It was terrible. Mostly white women. It was really bad. And most of them were afraid to post in the group. They just never said anything. I was like, why are you here? Why are you here? We're having these conversations. They're just like, I'm just afraid to say anything. I don't want to get in trouble. So weird. So they thought that reading all the posts, reading the recommended books, articles, that's all they had to do. They were already allies. And I said, if you're not going to participate, then I'm going to have to remove you. So you get your choice. You start participating or you're leaving the group. And I had tears and DMs. Oh my God, don't remove me. This is how I learn best. Such crap. You don't learn that way. I was like, no. And I said, okay, you guys get a month to start posting. So I ended up removing around 800 white women. I was like, we're not here to be like zoo animals for you. You have to participate. And I said, if you're not going to just open your mouth and talk, you're not benefiting us. So you could just move on to something else. So lots of tears. They're okay though. I'm sure they're fine. I can't worry about that. I gave them a chance. They didn't do it. So, and again, the dreaded call out. And this is what's what's weird about people being really scared of being called out is in my group, we moderate the call outs. So you're never gonna get dragged in my group. It's not gonna happen. So we have people who are kind of professional call out people. They will go through the process with you. It's long, but the goal isn't that we're punishing you. So if you feel embarrassed about it, that's fine, but we're not embarrassing you. You shouldn't be embarrassed. If it's a bad thing you said, yeah, be embarrassed about it, but also be serious enough about the work to say, I feel really bad about it, but I'm gonna let you take me through this process. Because the goal at the end is that you understand your mistake and that you really try not to make it in the future. I'm not saying that in other situations, don't get dragged because you have kids. But the times that has happened that I've seen, I tell people, if that's the reason that you stop being an ally, then you really weren't serious in the first place, And not everybody is here to educate you. People sometimes are just pissed. And they're just like, you said something bad, I'm gonna go off, I'm gonna say what I gotta say to you, and that's it. You really can't police people's emotions when it comes to racism. If you said something terrible, and somebody basically cussed you out or whatever, suck it up. Suck it up and go back to your affinity group and say, what did I do wrong? And have them work through it with you. The reason that you quit should never be because someone made you feel bad about your racism. Like that doesn't make sense. Like I said before, embrace discomfort. If you're an ally who's saying, this work is so easy, I never feel uncomfortable, I have great conversations, none of that's happening. None of that is happening because the people that I know who are actually having these discussions will tell you that most of them are just terrible. Like they don't even feel great having them, but they're uncomfortable. Other person's angry or they're crying or they're dismissive or whatever. They're always really uncomfortable. On the flip side, the people who I know who've done this work for years and are still getting called out are saying, still feels terrible, but I'm still doing it. It never feels good. It's never going to feel good. But again, the way that you grow and stretch as an ally is to just say, it's just going to happen. I'm going to get called out. Going to feel uncomfortable. I might have to cry. I don't know, but you just learn from it. And that's why I tell people don't do this work in a bubble. If it's just you, you're just going to fail. Just going to fail. You need at least another person to talk to, and not your family, like I said, not your family. I love this picture. It's an opera. I don't know. It's hilarious. Performative allyship. So these people, if you have not met them already, you will. They're so obvious in what they do. They start out amazing. They're like, ooh, I'm reading, I'm calling people out, I'm learning things. What happens though is that they get good in the beginning and then they start getting some compliments. You're doing really great. Wow, that call out you did was amazing. And they start pivoting towards, oh, I really like these compliments. I'm going to figure out how I can get more of these. So when you change from doing the work to trying to get people to give you compliments and accolades, you become performative. I mentioned someone in my book, it's a true story, who started out amazing. And as she progressed, she got good. And then she decided she loved getting compliments. So it went from I'm doing the work to things like, I'm the best ally. She would say that. Oh. Best ally, so great. And then she would say things like, I can rank the other white people who I know because some of them are really terrible and some of them are like really great. I mean, I'm the best, but some of them are just really, it was terrible. It was really bad. Then she decided that she was going to try to pit women of color against each other, kind of like behind our backs. But she was doing it because some of us already kind of understood that she's permanent. We were just leaving her alone. I was like, I don't want to deal with her. So she was deciding that she was going to try to figure out how to kind of take the rest of us out of our sisterhood with other women of color because she was on the outs with us. So long story short, she played herself really badly and another Black woman, not me, another Black woman basically pulled her aside and said, none of us can trust you. And you need to work on yourself and you need to stop using us. And I think, and she lives in St. Louis, you guys.
Uh-oh.
She does. She lives in St. Louis. She does. But she disappeared. I don't know where she even is now. She's just gone. It's you. Yeah, it's not you. basically said, we're done. We're not going to deal with you. And so I haven't seen her in like 2 years. I haven't heard from her in 2 years. But that we just said we're not going to allow you within the ally circle as far as we're concerned. So she was excommunicated. So you start centering and have ulterior motives, that is definitely things that happen when you are a performative ally. So anytime that you're trying to get compliments and accolades, you're centering your own feelings. And therefore, the work is not even important to you anymore. Comparing yourselves to others, like I said, there's no ranking. We don't rank you. I don't say, this is the best white ally ever. Like, I don't say that because I know that you guys kind of ebb and flow with how good you are at the work. So sometimes you're really great, and sometimes it's like, whew, I don't know what you're doing over there now. But so we know that sometimes whiteness is so amazingly attractive that you all kind of fall off. So we don't rank you, but you all rank each other, which I find hilarious. Comparing yourselves to others. Another thing that is to me a huge red flag. This person said to me, and I was like, no, that's not going to work. She said, I do not need to be corrected by other white people anymore. Oh. Only you can help me. And I said, oh no, I'm not helping you. I'm not helping you. So that's very, that's opposite of what we learned as allies. Why would you want to traumatize me with your horrible racism stories? Like, I don't want to hear them. But she was dead serious. Only you and a black woman. Like, no, we're not. So, again, if somebody is unwilling to be called in and corrected and criticized, that's not someone who's serious about ally work. And you have to call them out on that and ask them why they're doing that. But oftentimes it is a trait of just being extremely performative. Yeah. To wrap things up. Okay, so starting your own ally journey, please join more than one racial justice group. You can do them in person, do them online, a combination, but do 3 or 4 because you want to hear different stories and different experiences. And this is also where you're going to find the people that you're going to do your affinity group and the people that you're going to partner with, so you have some support when you're doing ally work. Accountability partner, like I said, find somebody, because doing this work on your own is never, ever, ever going to work for you, because no one's ever going to be able to keep you. You can't keep yourself in line. If you don't know what you're doing wrong and no one's telling you, you're just going to keep making those same mistakes. Build your library of books and documentaries and articles. There are people online who already have very huge libraries of anti-racism resources. You have to build your own. They're already there. You can just use what they have and just build your own library from there. But what you want to do also when you're educating someone is make sure that what you're giving them makes sense. If you're educating someone who's not computer literate, don't give them a whole bunch of links. It's not going to help. Print stuff out, give it to them. Listen and learn about anti-racism work. That again, it's going to be when you're in those groups and you're having discussions. So you're just going to be listening and paying attention. And then at some point, you're going to start educating other people. Role play, role play, role play. I think this has got to be hands down one of the best ways to move forward as an ally. All that practice, so you're not so nervous when you have the real conversation, is really helpful. And then lastly, you always want to turn listening into action. Don't get stuck just reading books and watching things and talking about the theory of racism. Nobody wants you to do that. Listen and learn, but definitely make sure whatever you're learning, you're conveying to other people. Work on yourself all the time. Make sure that you're just kind of checking in with you and seeing how you're doing. Have you really addressed your own racism? But every day as an ally, think about how you can educate other people, because that is how we're going to make real change. Thank you. Question. Yes, Shane.
So a lot of us have relationships, and we are very comfortable going to people to have discussions about race. And we have acquaintances that we may work with, or friend, or from a certain situation or group that we don't approach as often with things, even like not the hard conversations, but maybe even some of the kind of easier conversations. How do you start to transition a relationship into a relationship that you can have difficult conversations?
So with acquaintances, not necessarily people that you know well?
Yeah, I'm thinking
like a coworker?
Correct.
So
yeah.
as an ally, it's still going to be your job to approach them and say something when you notice things that are problematic. So let's say that let's move away from racism. Let's say if someone makes a sexist comment or makes a sexist joke in the workplace, it's your job to say, hey, that is unacceptable, and you might report them at that point. But if you're having a conversation and you just want to educate them, you could say, you made this joke about women and it's really harmful and it's not funny. And I like to say to people, why would you say that? Why would you think that was funny? Explain to me how that's an appropriate conversation for our workplace. You don't have to handhold them into having a gentle conversation with you. You might at that point have to make them just really think about it. Because one thing that I've realized most of the time, if you even kind of nicely call someone in, they're going to get upset and they're going to get defensive. And, you can say to them, I'm not trying to make you defensive. I'm trying to make you aware that what you said is problematic. We're in a workspace and that's unacceptable. It's harder at work because then you have to figure out, is this an HR issue? Is it an issue that has to go to my manager? But if it's someone that you like at work and they're kind of sort of a work friend, I would pull them aside and say, hey, that's not acceptable, and you might get in trouble for saying things like that, and see if they understand exactly why they even said that. The behaviors that we see out in the world are things people are doing in their homes and they think it's completely fine. And they get out the word like, ooh, I didn't realize that was a bad thing. This is terrible. It's dealing with people that are more of acquaintances. It's hard because you don't know them. You don't know how they're going to respond. But I still think it's our responsibility to say something. I wish someone had said something when I was working corporate and no one ever did. I wish someone had stepped in and said something. But I think a lot of the reason that we stay quiet is we just don't want to be involved. We don't want to get in trouble. We don't want to have to be responsible for anything. But as I've gotten older, I've just realized that I don't have the ability to not say anything anymore. And so I'd rather err on the side of someone thinks that, I'm problematic versus me keeping my mouth shut and letting something like that happen. I work in a library, so it's not as bad. But corporate America was pretty hideous. So that's a good question. Yes.
Can I bounce off of that?
Sure.
One thing that I have really struggled with is trying to learn how to be that person who does speak up in a way that actually is effective for changing the people in power and their policies and their approaches without losing my own job.
Yes. That's difficult.
Which I'd rather be me
Right.
than someone else.
Right.
But
Right.
it doesn't look great long term.
Right. No, I know what you're saying. And unfortunately, there's no way for us to know when you're going to get fired and when you're not. And we don't know how receptive people are. Interestingly enough, I was working with one of my allies. We might be doing some kind of like a DEI related workshop with this company that is a cannabis company. And when I tell you that the woman I talked to was not receptive of us talking at all to the executives because they set the tone of the organization. She was like, no, I think they're all fine. And I said, wait a minute, there's no women up there. It's all men. It's white men and Asian men, no women. And I was like, that's already a problem right there. So I'm not really sure how you think that's, I already see your issue right there. And your company is not diverse. I think that's what you're going to come across most of the time because for whatever reason, organizations think that the employees are solely the problem. We are not solely the problem. We are just a symptom of a larger problem up high. And rarely have I encountered people who are running an organization who will admit that they're the problem, So I don't even know if I have an answer for you, but I would say, I guess, try to weigh the situation and see how receptive that person would be. Consider posing it as a question, like, I'm wondering, why is it that we don't have any women in so-and-so position? Why is that? Why do you think that is? Can they not find people? Because I feel like as a woman that I couldn't even get into that position because there's nobody there that looks like me. Pose it as a question and see how they answer. That might be a better way to get in and not make them upset with you. But like I said, I don't think that most organizations are super open to recognizing that they are setting the tone of their company at the top levels. I think it's easier to say that the employees are all terrible and we got to fix them. And that's really never the case. You're welcome. Yes.
This might be kind of a silly question, but
It's not.
how do you recommend finding your local racial justice groups and avoid joining them? I feel like I know about what people are doing, but I don't really know, like, how do I join your organization? Or how do I Google for
So I would say look on some social media sites. I would do Facebook first. I would look on Twitter. I'd look on Instagram. Most of them have pages on there. You could Google, racial justice group St. Louis, and you're going to get like Witnessing Whiteness. You're going to get We Stories. You're going to get. I'm sure there's a Black Lives Matter chapters here. I'm sure there are. You also will probably get offshoots of some of those organizations where they are really focused on ally work. Because I know that St. Louis over, the past, 7 or 8 years has been exceedingly active with protesting and marching. So those organizations are still out there. My guess is that they are on social media having discussions. I would check there. And again, when you're in your racial justice group, people are going to know. People will know, especially from people who are local. They're like, well, I know these organizations. So I would do that. That's a good question. Thank you.
Jumping all the way back to Uncle Bob.
Oh, Uncle Bob. He's so great.
What if it's almost everyone in your family?
Yeah, I think that's really common. I have a couple of choices. There are people who will just say, I'm just done. I don't ever expect people to do that. I'm not going to ask you that of you, but you get to be the person they hate to see coming for Thanksgiving.
I am.
Okay, so you're doing it. That's it. And if that's the best you can do, then that's what you do. You're the person like, oh, is she coming? Dang. Like, that's the person you want to be.
All right.
Yeah, that's the person you want to be. If they're not willing to be educated, then you have to be instigator. That's what it is.
Specific to, I won't let my kids be around you. I don't have kids. I could in the future. Where is that? Because I don't want to not see my whole family. They're okay people. They're good. They're nice. But they don't do their work.
Yeah. So I would say, if you have a child in the future, be very aware of what is said around that child.
Yeah.
And then in their presence, shut it down so that they know that's unacceptable.
Yeah.
It's funny because I don't think that most parents really realize how much those kids' grandparents affect what those kids believe. And while it's easy and I think kind of naive to say, well, they're liberals, they couldn't be racist. That doesn't matter at all. Some of the worst people I've dealt with have been on the left because they already assume because they're voting properly that they don't have any issues. And it's like, it's lovely that you vote that way, but you still say these terrible things.
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying that you have to completely disown your family, but just be aware when you have children that, whatever your family's saying, your kids are going to hear it. And if you don't say something, that moment they're going to start picking that up and believing it. Yes.
So when it comes to affinity groups, for example, I really support this organization within my industry called Sisters of the Skies, which is
What's your industry?
Aviation.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Okay.
So they promote and mentor Black women to become pilots, which is awesome.
That's amazing.
A hell of a lot more pilots. I would love for them all to be Black because it's a white male industry.
It is.
When I'm supporting these groups, I need to know. First of all, I just don't want to throw my money at them because that is important. But it's also
money's good. Yeah.
Money's always good. But I also don't just want to be like, okay, well, I've given my, $50 for the month, that's it, I'm done. But I also want to be aware of, I'm in someone else's space, right? So I want to speak up and I want to be the good ally, but I don't want to like overshadow.
Right. So, they have meetings and you're going to them, or like, how are you, and how are you?
They have like galas and stuff, but in that sense, I don't want to show up and be like, oh, hey.
Look at them now.
Yeah. Because I don't want to be performative, right?
Right, but in that case, I would ask them if you can come, because they very much may want you to be there.
Sure.
And that's a really good question as far as what's the line between being supportive and just basically just being overbearing and annoying,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So what I tell people, anytime that you're in a space that you're supporting any marginalized group and you're not part of that group, you're never going to be the loudest person. If you are, that's a problem. So you need to be there in a support role. If it's something where they're protesting or marching, you need to be passing that mic when you can. I tell people also, like, if you have ways that can kind of get them in the door of organizations because you work there or you know people there, that's how you're going to support those organizations. I bet they want you at that gala though.
Okay.
I would just ask. I'm sure they would want you there.
Awesome.
You just don't want to ever be like the main person of a group that you're not part of. Like if they're meeting, if there's like a Black Lives Matter meeting, nobody wants to hear like the white person up here. You don't want everyone to hear that. It's a good question.
There's a similar question online.
Mhm.
Denise asks, does allyship ever become saviorship?
Yes, all the
When-
time.
When do white people know we've crossed the line? Or is it okay in some circumstances
No.
to cross the line?
No,
Thank you for your question, Denise.
no, it's never okay. That's interesting. I should have covered that in my talk. And yeah, that happens a lot. And these are the ways that I see it. So when I've had to call white women in particular out about that, it's because they're treating me like I'm a child. So if I'm asking for you to help me reach equality and equity, somewhere they're thinking, well, obviously she's just not able and capable of doing this on her own, not because I'm Black, but because I'm just obviously either a child or immature or whatever. That happens a lot. So there's this idea that if Black women are asking for your help, that you have to save us from ourselves, from our men, from our communities, and that is not the case. It happens. The white savior thing is so common and so upsetting on so many levels. I have had to tell people we are not children. And Black women, we have worked really hard to get where we are now. And if it took just hard work, we'd be equal. But that's not, it takes more than that. It takes you all to help us. So it's kind of a fine line. The white savior thing is never going to be the answer. Ever, ever, ever. And you have to think about how you feel about the work and how you feel about Black women. The worst saviors in history have been the abolitionists, because abolitionists, when they were supposed to be helping the Black people, they really did see us as children and inferior, but they were saving us. They were saving us from slavery, but they didn't see us as equal. So that's a very classic case of being a white savior. Modern times, I've had that conversation multiple times about why it's a problem if you don't see me as an equal. I tell people, look, I have 2 advanced degrees, pretty smart person here. If I were white, I would be further ahead in my life. But because I have Black skin and I've had a lot of obstacles because of that, I'm reaching out to you as white people to help me reach equality. But it's not because I'm less than you. And that's, and it's frustrating because that, to me, that is absolutely a form of racism. And if you look back at, slavery, we were looked at as children. Black people were looked at as less than human and children in a lot of times. So it to me, it's just kind of like an awful flashback of those times when you say you have to swoop in and save me. So it's really frustrating. And that is something that anytime you hear or say it as an ally, you have to call that out. And they're really blatant about it. You'll hear it and be like, oh God, it's really blatant. It's really blatant. You'll know it immediately. Yeah. Yes.
Going back to the idea of like any group is not a monolith, including Black people,
Mhm.
queer people, whatever group you're being an ally to
Right.
or with. I oftentimes feel like I have experiences where people have different ideas of what they want an ally to be, and so within a group,
Yeah.
your allyship that matches what somebody's asking you to do is angering somebody else, or like not what they want you to do. And so,
Yeah.
how do you navigate like those types of situations?
That happens all the time. It happens all the time. I would say in that case, you have to figure out, and again, this is something you work with your affinity group with, figure out the things that are common. One thing that I've come across, because I have an education background, so to me, allyship is all about educating white people. But there are people doing the work, there are Black women doing the work who are rightfully so furious. And they don't want to educate. They're just like, I'm just gonna be really angry, I'm gonna be really communicative. That's not my way, but I'm also very much understanding that is their way. So it's justified. If that were the situation, and you were in both groups, you have to decide for yourself, like, what do you want? If you're looking for an education, you're probably gonna have to go someplace else. It really depends on what kind of ally you want to be and what those qualities look like. So you don't have to stay in a group if you think it's not really aligning with what you think an ally should be, because there are just core things that you should be doing as an ally. And one of the things that I say very adamantly is that any group out there, I don't care what marginalized group it is, if the idea is to punish your allies, then that's not something that I'm interested in. I want everybody to have an opportunity to do better, be educated. We need numbers. So I'm not trying to run people off, But having said that, I know that those groups exist. It's just not my way. But you have to figure that out for yourself and decide kind of, also what's moving you forward. Is that group actually moving you forward? Some of the things that will be different will be so vastly different that you'll know this one's not going to help me, but this one is going to help me. It is okay to leave that group and go someplace else. That's why I said have multiple groups, because one of them you probably are going to ditch and be like, no, that's not going to work. And it might just be because the dynamic in there is just so toxic that you just, you're not getting what you need out of the group. And we all know that being able to manage an online group is extremely hard. So, it's really difficult, and sometimes it just gets out of hand and it's just a space where nobody's learning and everyone's just infighting. And that's obviously not a space where you're going to grow as an ally. That's a good question. Yes.
I'm not sure if this is a question, but I wanted to share an observation that I have. A few of us here go to the Brown School at WashU.
I'm at WashU too! I'm the librarian there. I'm the business librarian.
Oh, cool. So
yes, I know you're librarian.
We're in the Brown School. And during orientation, there were a few sessions that talked about DEI, how to have difficult conversations. And in one of them, there was like a text your answer in, and it popped up on the screen. And the question was like, what are you afraid of having difficult conversations? And it's a majority white women area, a lot of white women. And a lot of them were saying, I'm afraid to say something wrong.
Yeah.
I'm afraid to be wrong.
Yeah.
And when I was seeing that, I was thinking, like, that's kind of selfish.
It is. I think it's what women do, though. I think that we are kind of like, we are harder on ourselves than like we think other people will be on us.
True.
So I think we'll talk ourselves out of kind of stretching and being uncomfortable, because I think it's society, we're supposed to be more agreeable. I mean, we're not, but we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be more agreeable, right?
Yeah.
So I think that really hinders us from having uncomfortable conversations, which is odd because we have closer relationships than men.
Right.
So it doesn't even make any sense. But yeah, I think it's hard for us to kind of get out of our comfort zone. We're also emotional. So that's really, it's really difficult because, we like to cry. So yeah, all right. But yeah, that's a good question too. The whole thing about being afraid of having the conversation, we got to get over that.
Yeah.
You know, and to me, you know, yes, Black women are doing a lot of the racial justice work, but if we get the bulk of white women, we are going to be unstoppable. We're going to be unstoppable, you know, and that's kind of my goal. I want us to be making the policies and driving all the change in this country and then creating this amazing country.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. We're going to do it. Is that time though?
Yeah.
It is 8:08, y'all. Kept the store open.
So sorry. I do want our booksellers to be able to go home. Otherwise, I would continue this all night. But thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So much.
You're welcome. I'm gonna sign some really quick.
And we do. She is here for signing. So
So you're really fast.
yes.
Really fast.
And you can purchase at the desk. They are still there.
Great.
And I have a bowl.
It does.
Yeah, I would like to.
I love it.
Like, we could both be terribly disappointed.
What if I read it first, right?
I think you
for a new
probably
book, so
will.
maybe I'll start it.
Thank you.
I'll let you
Also
know.
been following you and,
Okay, yeah.
Do you
I'm
follow me
a
on
Guinness
Twitter?
yes, the antics of Guinness.
Yes. No, it is not. And you get a new one. I love being able to put it. Love.
Oh,
Love.
Yeah, let me tell you, he